Halfway through the NFL season, and we have a lot to discuss. We are currently after the NFL trend line, and this is Say It Like You See It. I'm your host, Trace the Moose Moustakis from the heart of Packers country, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Joining me, my partner in crime, my other host, Quinn Mighty Q Redmond. Let's bring him in. Quinn, how's it going? We are halfway through the NFL season. And there's some eye-opening stuff. There's a lot of false contenders. There's a lot of pretenders and only a couple contenders.
Yeah, you're right on that one. As we hit the halfway mark, which what used to be the relative halfway mark, but now that there's 18 weeks since there's the 17 game schedule, we got that coming up next week. But for the days of when there were 16 games, this used to be the halfway mark, and especially the trade deadline normally always marked that halfway point. You had some teams who definitely made some moves and said, let's get better. We want to, add to a team that we think is really, really good. And then you had some teams who just kind of doubled down on what they were doing. And a lot of those teams are bad teams, and a lot of those other teams just have bad front offices. So we'll see how that all ends up panning out.
Well, like you said, speaking of all those teams, let's go to my first graphic because we are officially, like I said, in the halfway point, which means it's time for midterms. We're taking you to school. This is the graphic that I put up. This is obviously your NFL midterm grades so far. Now, they're not actually grades, but more as a tier themselves. The very first one, we have got the elites at the very top, obviously, Baltimore and Philadelphia. The BAMFs, the badass motherfuckers is what I like to call them. And obviously, these are the guys that can win and it is a top 5 team every single week. Obviously, that's littered with San Francisco, Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, the Jags, the Dolphins, and the Cowboys. The surprisingly good tiers. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we thought these teams were going to be bad, but we're surprised at how good these teams are. Only a few in there because obviously the Lions, I had them considering being around that BAMF, that BAMF tier, but I think they're just one little tiny piece away from being considered that badass motherfucker. And then you've got the mid tier. Obviously, these are the teams that if they disappeared completely from the NFL season, I don't think anybody would notice. Then you've got the close, but yet so far as these are teams that we like certain aspects of their play. They're just not yet quite to be, they're not that next step. Most of these teams either have a good offense or a good defense, but one side of the ball just completely remains to be seen. Then you've, of course, got the ass tier, which my beloved Chicago Bears sit on, and then the dumpster fires, the worse than worse, the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. And that is, of course, the New York Giants, the Green Bay Packers, and the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's start with any of the glaringly obvious ones. I'm going to take it to you, Mighty Q. What do you see? What sticks out to you right now?
Honestly, it's an okay tier. It's an okay list. But I've got a handful of problems, and of course, we got to start right up top. And it's an issue with the Buffalo Bills. And the reason I say the Bills is so who they're right next to being the Bengals, that is another one of my issues. So the two of those teams are what I'm going to start with. You've got the Bills, who are a roller coaster team. The thing with the Bills is the Bills are very, very good when they want to be good. The Bills are a team that when they decide that they want to show up and they want to play, the Bills are very good. And sometimes, though, they might play a team that's really bad, and the Bills just completely won't show up. And then they have an issue where that will kind of nag on them for a little bit. They won't hit as sharp as we know that they can. They won't do as many things as they used to do. So you look at, hey, what is so great about the Bills? And it's like, well, like Josh Allen, like their running game is okay, but it's not really there. Their defense is like, it's pretty good, but their coach is a defensive guy, and yet I don't trust him in a lot of situations. So, like, the Bills, they're okay. Like, they're a good, not great team. Like, they're obviously flawed. And then the issue with the Bengals is, right now, the Bengals, I get it, they got off to a slow start. That's kind of what the Bengals do. But a thing now with them is they're looking at one of the hardest schedules remaining in the NFL. And so because they got off to that slow start, they now have to run through an absolute gauntlet of all of the best teams and a very, very hard schedule and a tough schedule looking ahead of them, as I'm still a little bit concerned because, yeah, they've played well and now off a bye. They played well before then. Is Joe Burrow healthy? Are they, fully 100% ready to go? And even if they are, they're going to have to run in for a very tough sled these next handful of weeks, as they just have a grueling schedule the rest of the way. And when it comes time for their final game in week 18, they play the Browns. And if they're kind of on that borderline type situation, the Browns have owned them as of late. So this could be one where the Bengals may put themselves a little bit too far behind early because they're 0-3 in the AFC. So rather than I understand that they got themselves back record-wise, but because of their initial losses and where they're at, they're not like on the border, on the fringe right now. They're one of those teams that are even further removed because they're underneath even the Jets at this point, is just due to they got off to a slow start. They didn't play well early, and now they may have put themselves behind the 8 ball because now even if they win, they have to essentially win out, but they're going to have to play teams that they struggled with the Browns. They have the Ravens again in a couple times. They've got the Steelers again. So it's like they're in a tough division. The AFC is the tough conference, and they have all of their hardest games all right in front of them. So I definitely, with those two, I mean, is there anything about those that you want to kind of push back on?
Yeah. But the only one that I would actually give you a little bit of credence for, and I would actually allow you to kind of give you a little bit of slack for, is the Bills. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of aspects of the Bills game that I don't like. They brought it, they made James Cook the starter for that team at running back. He still hasn't done much other than maybe one or two good halves. The run game is completely reliant on Josh Allen. So I'm going to get to the Bills in a second, but I'm going to push back a little bit on the Cincinnati Bengals. Do you remember last year at this time, the Cincinnati Bengals had almost an identical problem as they did last year? They started off 1-3 last year and then rattled off 6 wins in a row. This is exactly what you're seeing. We see this a lot from Joe Burrow. He's not healthy at the beginning of the season. He doesn't play a lot during preseason, so it takes him a lot longer to get back into the flow of things. But once he is the number 1 rated quarterback through the months of middle of October through the end of the year. Last year, he raised his QBR all the way from like 22nd in the league to top 3 in those months. So when it comes to late games, late season games and bad weather games, Joe Burrow is outstanding. And I think that's exactly what you're going to be seeing from the Cincinnati Bengals. Their defense looked sharper. They looked great against the San Francisco 49ers. I realize Brock Purdy has been struggling as of late, but they went in and they dominated both sides of the football against San Francisco, so much so that San Francisco said, we got to make a big move. We got to make a big swing at the trade deadline. So we're going to go out and get Chase Young. I mean, Nick Bosa is not cutting it on that defensive line. They could not get to Joe Burrow, who, believe it or not, has a really weak offensive line still. So I think the Cincinnati Bengals are right where you want to be. I think they're the hottest team in the league right now. I think nobody wants to play them. And I wouldn't be surprised if they rattle off another 4 or 5 wins in a row and completely take over the AFC North. So, yeah, I think the Bengals right now, don't look at the record. Don't look at that 4-3 record as kind of where they're sitting at. Yeah, they started off slow, but as of right now, they are kicking ass and they are taking names.
Yes, but my issue there though has to do with the fact that they already put themselves. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like, everyone wants to go at the halfway point and say, okay, we have to look ahead at the next half of the season. What are we looking at? What's going on here? They play 2 games the rest of the season with teams with losing records currently. They're not there. It's not a matter of, oh, this is the Bengals, they're a good team. I do think they're a good team. But when you have to play good team after good team week after week for the remainder of your season, that just starts to weigh on you. Their conference and in division is a tough division. You have the Ravens, who we all were talking about last week as, oh my gosh, are the Ravens the best team in the NFL?
I'll give you that.
They're clearly that. Well, they have to play the Ravens in 3 weeks. They play the Bills this week. They have the Jaguars still on the schedule in Jacksonville. Like, there's a lot of tough games ahead for them. They play the Chiefs in Arrowhead towards the end of the season in what is their 16th game. And then you end the season off with the Browns, a team that they've always played bad against. So it could be an issue where coming in the last 3 weeks of the season, you play in Pittsburgh. And I get it. It's, again, in division game, and it's on the road. Those are tough games to win. Doesn't matter if your team is good or bad. And we've seen that last week with the Chiefs and the Broncos. It's hard to win those in-division games. It's hard to win those games multiple times against teams that you see 2 times a year, every year, and you're on the road in their stadium. It's tough. It's going to be hard to do. Then you have to go to Arrowhead, and then you get the Browns, a team that has beaten you at your place and at their place since Joe Burrow's coming to the league. It's just a tough matchup for them, and that's why I say, hey, this is tough for the Bengals. It's not, hey, Joe Burrow isn't good, because Joe Burrow is good, but Joe Burrow struggles with the Browns because of a matchup issue. The way that the Browns are constructed makes the Bengals just have issues all across. Like, they can't get the ball out to the receivers, whether it be Higgins, whether it be Chase. Their run game is absolutely stifled because the Browns and the way that they match up stylistically. So I think the Bengals are going to play great. I think the Bengals are going to continue to play good football, but it's going to end up being just short because I feel that they're going to win a majority of these games going ahead. But the issue is, winning a majority of these games going ahead isn't going to leapfrog them up to the top because they're 4th in their own division right now. It's not going to leap them from 4-1 if they start splitting a bunch of these games, which that's kind of the way that they do. They just don't match up well against the Browns, and they already lost early in the season. I think they're probably going to split with Pittsburgh, and they have a chance to catch it back and win against the Ravens. But honestly, the way that Lamar Jackson's playing this year and the way that defense is, I think the Ravens will take it.
Yeah, and I agree with you in the sense that I believe the Ravens are going to win that division, and I think it's not going to be particularly close. I don't think the Bengals are, especially with their schedule, I don't think that this is a 12-win team. I think this is a 9-10-win team that sneaks its way into the playoffs in that 6 or 7 spot. But consider this. If the Bengals are in the 6 or 7 spot, that is a dangerous, dangerous conference because at any given point, I mean, we've seen them go up toe-to-toe in Arrowhead the last 3 years. What have they made? 3 straight conference championship games? I mean, 2 or 3 straight conference championship games where Burrow has completely outdueled Mahomes. We wouldn't be surprised if the 7th seed in the AFC, if it was Cincinnati, would make it to the Super Bowl. So it could be one of those New York Giants situations back in the Brady era where if you get hot at the right time, there's nobody stopping you. I think they match up really well against Pittsburgh. I realize it's an in-division game, but Pittsburgh's offense is one of the worst in the league, and they rely solely on that defense. You put enough pressure on that Pittsburgh offense, you can go in there to Heinz Field, and you could dominate whatever side of the ball you want to dominate. I'm not concerned about Pittsburgh. The Browns... Look, the Browns got their quarterback situation under control. If Deshaun Watson actually acted like he wanted to play football, I would agree with you. I think that defense is outstanding. I know that they gave up a lot of points to Gardner Minshew. Every team has a bad week. They played much better against Seattle this last week, got beat by a last play Geno Smith heave, and he continues to delight us. So I think there's a lot to like about the Browns defense. But with that quarterback issue and P.J. Walker starting – and getting rid of Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think Cleveland is slowly starting to admit to themselves that maybe the Deshaun fully guaranteed contract was a huge mistake. I think they don't look at it like that right now. I think they kind of look at it as, well, when he fully gets healthy, it'll be different. Is it going to be that different? I don't think Deshaun really wants to play football anymore. I think once he got that guaranteed deal, it kind of gave him a sense of entitlement. Like, I can do whatever I want here. What are you going to do? Get rid of me? You can't. You're going to eat so much money in cap, you're going to be screwed for the next 3 to 4 years. So I think you're in a position right now where you're the Cincinnati Bengals and you're saying to yourself, look, we're not going to take out Baltimore. They're too good right now. Our best bet is to dominate and lock up that wild card position. And then hopefully we get hot at the right time and Baltimore gets knocked off early. And then we have a clear path to Arrowhead where we know we can go in and win and get back to another Super Bowl.
And so here's the other ones that I'll have an issue with. Ends up being the Cowboys and the Chargers. So with the Cowboys, I don't think they should be that high. I think they can be knocked down slightly. And then
Well,
with the
that's why I have them at the
Chargers,
very end. That's why I have them at the
with the
very end of that Banff list.
the
Like,
Chargers is one.
go ahead.
So the Chargers is one. They're currently second in their division. That is going to kind of help them because it helps that you get to play 2 games against the Raiders and 2 games against the Broncos. That's games that they're fine with. Then you start to look at the rest of the season, kind of the way that they're laid out for the remainder. They're going to end up being okay. Like, their coach makes a lot of issues, but like, to your same credit, all they really have to do is be slightly over 500 to be playing in that wild card type spot situation to get 5, 6, or 7. And so it's a competition to figure out a way to one of those wild card spots because we know they're not knocking off the Chiefs. But for them, because they get to play the Raiders and the Broncos, like, that does definitely kind of help. But they also have the rest of their season, the way it lines up, they realistically only have to get to, again, that 8 or 9 win mark to try to steal one of those away. And I think that they have enough talent to do it because Justin Herbert is what we all say he is. It's just like, will the rest of the team show up that day? Like, everyone else has talent. We've seen them have talent. Like, we've seen them all play well, but for some reason, it's like, hey, why are they not winning football games? And it's like, oh, it's like the defense made a couple mistakes here. The coach made a mistake here. Oh, the offensive line made this mistake here. And then it's like, oh, well, what did Justin Herbert do? And it's like, he showed up and he executed. And it's like, he wasn't spectacular. Like, he got a B- on the test, but I mean, that was his worst test grade that he's gotten this year. But it's like, what does the rest of his stuff look like? And it's like, I don't know, a lot of B pluses and A minuses.
That's kind of why I have them at that mid grade. If you want to put that back up real quick, that's why I have them in the middle of the pack. Is I think because they play the Broncos and the Raiders, this is a team where, I can't put them at surprisingly good. They haven't been. Their offense has been good, but their defense has been terrible. Up until the Bears game, they were the worst pass defense in the league. I realize Mahomes is the GOAT, and we can't compare anybody to whatever Patrick Mahomes is doing, but this is the same defense that gave up 321 yards in one half. I mean, GOAT or not, that is really bad. So this Chargers team is kind of an enigma to me. They've got great pieces around them. They've got 2 excellent pass rushers. They've got a top 10 quarterback. They've got a fantasy destruction nightmare hybrid running back in Austin Eckler that just seems to start getting healthy. And yet they're 3-4. So what's the issue? Well, you could point to a lot of things. Big plays, giving up a lot of those. Brandon Staley not knowing what the hell he's doing. So that's where my concern comes in, is as they get later on throughout the year and they get more into these close games, it is a very Chargers thing to do to lose a game 34-31 because of a missed field goal or because Brandon Staley made the wrong call. He's a full-time analytics guy and doesn't seem to realize the flow of the game and account for human error. So I think one of the to your point, yeah, they might have a more favorable schedule coming up, but the Chargers are still going to do Chargers things, and I think that bodes negatively for them. I view this team as a 7 or 8 win team.
That's fair. And then, I mean, I'll kind of touch my last one for that being that same reason. So you have them at close, but yet so far for the same reason we don't even have to get into, because we'll get into it later as we transition to kind of some other stuff that we talk about with getting into playoffs. So, but I just think that the Texans are better than those that in that same level with.
Well, so
my thinking and taking.
I'll give you some credit on this one. When it comes to the Texans, this was the team that I struggled the most with in this tier ranking, as I didn't know where to put them. I didn't want to put them at mid because I feel like there's a lot of different points where I'm like, are you a good team? Are you a bad team? That loss to Carolina really, really hurts. I mean, not so much because you lost to the worst team in the league or the team with the worst record, but because of how you lost. I mean, you only put up 13 points. So, and I realize CJ Stroud was rookie quarterback, and I think that's a lot why I have them in that close. But so far, the Texans are 1 to 2 years away from being really, really good. They've got an unbelievably young team. Will Anderson is only going to get better. Tank Dell seems to be a complete hit. CJ Stroud is playing well. I think they need a better running back. I don't think Dameon Pierce is good enough to kind of back up what they're trying to do with CJ Stroud and complement his game well. So going out and maybe getting another running back in the draft, a couple of pieces here and there on the front line would really, really help, some run blockers. But I think D'Amico Ryans is doing an unbelievable job. They're setting a new culture with new players, young guys, and just making it a great place to play for a historically underachieving franchise outside of those few years that they had Deshaun Watson and J.J. Watt. So I think you're right. I think that's why I have them this close to being a pretty decent team. But the Houston Texans couldn't give it to them after that Carolina Panthers loss. But like I said, a very, very tough situation, and you're really, really happy with where you are if you're a Texans fan.
So we wanted to do a week 8 prediction in terms of what we're doing with playoffs. So we're at the halfway point, or what is the halfway point being the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. And we're going to start in the NFC. And so we're going to talk about teams that we have as division winners, and then we'll get into the AFC division winners, and then we'll talk about the wild cards each, just because we're going to rank the same. It's easier to talk about the division winner. And so then this is what we've got leading off. So for both Trace and myself, we're even across the board. We both believe the NFC North, South, and East are going to be won by the same. And the only place where we're differing is in the West. Trace has the 49ers winning, and I have the Seahawks winning. I did kind of go back and forth in terms of with the South. I have been very back and forth between the Falcons and the Saints, but essentially at this point, I'm going with Derek Carr and the Saints rather than the Falcons winning the division, just because Derek Carr is more seasoned, and I think he understands what the end of seasons look like and how to make it through. And I think the Saints will basically continue to operate at that middle sector rather than fluttering down to the bottom. And so, Trace, you're going with the 49ers. What is your reasoning on saying the 49ers are going to win? Because I think it's pretty obvious for everyone with the NFC North, and really kind of the same with the South. Like, we understand why we have the Saints there, but what's your reasoning on the 49ers? What do you like about them?
So it's funny you mentioned this. If you would have asked me an hour before that Chase Young move happened, I probably would have given the slight nod to the Seahawks. But right after I heard that Chase Young news, I was like, ooh, that changes things, and that changes things quick, because now you have to account for 2 unbelievable pass rushers on both sides of the football, when prior to the last 2 weeks, and it really was the last 2 weeks, I'm not even counting the week against the Browns, we all considered the 49ers defense to be a top 5 defense, correct? Brock Purdy was playing out of his mind, and he currently is in a slump. We don't know what it is. Is it his limitations as a quarterback in the 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant? Probably. Is it a coaching issue in the red zone and the red zone defense not being as good? That probably has something to do with it. But I think this new lease on life, hearing that the team is willing to do whatever it takes, Shanahan doing whatever it takes, and John Lynch doing whatever it takes to make sure that this team gets back to that 10-game winning streak that they had before, I think you're going to see a big turnaround here for the San Francisco 49ers. In fact, I'm predicting that they go on a 4-game win streak starting this week. They're going to go in and win 4 in a row. Seattle's playing good. I'll give them that. But Seattle has a lot of holes. Defensively, Seattle is very mediocre. I think they rank 21 and 22 respectively against the run and the pass. Geno Smith is having another really good year. They've got some really great pieces on offense. Their offensive line has gotten a lot better than years past. But I just don't think, when it comes down to it, I just don't think that they don't have the veterans that San Francisco has. I mean, San Francisco is one of the oldest teams in the league. They've got guys that know exactly what it takes to win, going forward and playoff football. And I think as the games come down, I think you're going to see Seattle kind of lose its grip. I'm not saying Seattle's going to be bad. In fact, I think this is probably a 9 or a 10 win team, which is going to be good enough for that 5 or 6 seed in the East, or sorry, in the NFC. Rather, but I'm looking at the San Francisco 49ers and I'm saying, yeah, they're not playing well right now, but consider what they have gone up against. They went up against the Bengals. They went up against that unbelievable Browns defense. And that only really bad loss that they had was against the Vikings on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, whatever it was. So I'm looking at this like I'm like, look, two really tough opponents for the San Francisco 49ers. Chuck it out the window. You had one really bad loss against the Vikings. Now it's time to kind of turn the table, start fresh, and rattle off 4 more wins. And if that's the case and they go back up to 9-3, do you think we're going to be even having this conversation? I don't think so. I think everyone's going to say the exact same thing. Look, they went into a slump. It's the NFL. Anybody can beat anybody on any given Sunday. So the 49ers are going to be back. I'm not worried about it.
See, and that's kind of where I'm actually going to go and kind of stay. So on the other hand, I do not think that the Seattle defense is mediocre in terms of actual yards per game, sure, but in terms of actual points per game and what they're doing, this defense is almost as like this is their best defense almost since their Legion of Boom type eras. Like this is a very young defense. They are flying around. They are very fast, and they are coming to lay the wood. There's no shortage of damage being thrown out by the Seattle defense. Pete Carroll has them tuned up. He does a lot better with young teams than he does with old teams. That's just because he was more of a college guy, and it is kind of his coaching style. It's his stick. It's his, his team story, some stuff up. He kind of preach on some stuff, and that's exactly what all of those veteran guys start to say about him. He say, yeah, it's kind of the same story. It's the same stuff. And then while it starts to kind of wear on you, right now, he's got these young guys believed it. He's got a complete rebirth of Geno Smith, who's now playing better than Russell Wilson did in his last handful of years. And it's better complementary football. He's a phenomenal coach. He's been there before, done that, won a Super Bowl, knows what he's doing. Shanahan hasn't won a Super Bowl. He hasn't made it through. Yes, he's a phenomenal coach. Yes, he does things, but he makes a lot of issues too. He does put his players through an absolute ringer. The 49ers come through and they absolutely bang on people. The way that they play football for a while there, I want to say before the last couple games that they've lost, the last 20 games before that, teams were 1-19 the week after playing the 49ers. So it's not that, you would lose to the 49ers. You would then lose the next week because so many guys were beat up and bruised and battered, because the 49ers play a very physical style of football, both on offense and defense. So for them, I don't think that Seattle is going to shrink to that. I think the fact that you've got a phenomenal seasoned guy in Geno Smith, he's been around, he's on a resurgence, he's got a chip on his shoulder, he's got a reason to stay determined and stay driven and doing all the same things he's doing. He's played outstanding football, and I think he's going to continue to play outstanding football. It's perfect complementary football, and that's a very young team, and they know exactly kind of what's going on because they've got Pete leading the ship and Geno leading the ship for them as well. And I think that Brock Purdy isn't that good of a quarterback. Like everyone wants to talk about, oh, he's in a slump. Brock Purdy's main thing is Brock Purdy doesn't make mistakes. Brock Purdy doesn't have the arm talent. Brock Purdy doesn't have the arm strength. Brock Purdy doesn't have the mobility. Brock Purdy doesn't have the size. There's nothing that Brock Purdy does exceptionally well, except he was a guy who didn't make mistakes. He's now making mistakes. He's now being asked to do things that he can't do. Brock Purdy is a very limited quarterback that didn't make mistakes the same way that Jimmy G didn't make mistakes when he was put in the same situation. Now, the fact that Brock Purdy is asked to go and win football games and throw the ball a lot of times, being down and trailing in football games, knowing that they can't just hand the ball off to Christian McCaffrey or hit him on a little dump screen, that is an issue. He has to be asked to go out there and win football games, and he can't do it. There's a reason guys are drafted where they're at. There's a reason that guys fall and slip through the cracks and they have these great tarnishing moments. He's not a long-term seasoned guy. He's a guy who still hasn't played a complete full season of football. He's played like 15 games. So the fact that he started super hot and was 11-0 or 10-0, whatever that record was, we saw the same thing out of Big Ben. Big Ben, when he first started, I want to say 13-0, 10-0, 11-0, 12-0, 13-0, something like that. The same way that Brock Purdy started on his undefeated streak. But the difference is Big Ben was an actual good prospect that no one missed. Like, it's not hard to miss on a guy who's that big, mobile, has a super strong arm, and can do things that make you go, wow, Brock Purdy has none of that. Brock Purdy is I don't turn the football over guy. And so now that he's making mistakes, the fact that he's being asked to do the things that he cannot do, he's not hey, here's the ball, go lead us down on a drive. In terms of, there's a stat in turnover percentage plays. Brock Purdy is 6th on that list. The 5 guys in front of him, PJ Walker is number 1, Tyson Bagent is number 2, Mac Jones, Jimmy G, and there was another, and Gardner Minshew. The thing that all 5 of those guys have in front of them is they were all
franchise quarterbacks. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it wasn't Jimmy G. It wasn't Jimmy G though. Even though Jimmy G does lead in interceptions, he has missed time and missed games. So the exact comparison, Jimmy G took the 49ers to a Super Bowl. People said Jimmy G is too limited. He can't do the wow things that any good or great quarterback can do. We need to move on and get someone better. That's why they went and got Trey Lance. Trey Lance had more upside that they never even gave a chance to try to develop and try to do whatever with. They saw 3 games out of Trey Lance, 2 games where he actually played pretty good football. And then he played some bad preseason games with 3rd string guys blocking and playing around him. It wasn't like he was playing behind Trent Williams with Christian McCaffrey on his side, Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle out there. He was playing with backups and scrubs and going out there and making mistakes, but he had more upside. He's a better athlete. He was a stronger guy. Like Brock isn't that. So the fact that he's making mistakes now, it's kind of what Brock Purdy is. He's a super limited guy. They can't really be in situation. So if they're not up, I don't trust the 49ers like at all. They have to get out to a lead. If they're not out to a lead, then like that's it. Like they can't come back and win. And it's also Shanahan's coaching style. His coaching style falls and leads around the play action. It's a very strong run game. It's a run first type of offense. They run the ball phenomenally well. They get those linemen who do a great job run blocking, getting them downhill. You punish the defense. You get them tired. You get them on their heels. And then you use the phenomenal talent that you have to hit a play action. And then you have 2 guys who are wide open with 8 yards of space around them. You hit a little dump off on a 6-yard ball. And next thing you know, he breaks it for 17. Or a different guy who's running wide open and he's at 13 yards down the field. And it's like, yeah, that's a pitch and catch. Any quarterback can go into the system and win football games. It's not a Brock Purdy is good thing. It's a Kyle Shanahan knows how to design an offensive run scheme to get a play action look that makes guys be wide open because the linebackers have to come downhill and respect it. That's why they're so good. But if you get the ball first and you go down and score, and then you come back and you punch him in the face and you get the ball back, or you get a punt from him or a turnover, and then let's say you score again, like next thing you know, the 49ers are going to have to put their hands up because it's like, shit, we're down 10 points. Like, I don't know. Like, it's going to be hard for us to establish the run game because then like you got your DNs. It's like, go have fun. It's the same way the Cowboys win football games. Like it's super limited. And it's because the quarterback is limited. I just think that Geno is better than Brock Purdy, period. Like in terms of an apples to apples comparison, it's like the 49ers have a great, the Seahawks have a great young defense. In terms of defense, great is great. Like it doesn't matter old or young. And it's like on offense, who do I have throwing the football? And it's like Brock Purdy or Geno Smith. And it's like, fuck, I'll give the nod to Geno Smith. Like he's been around. He's seen more. He understands the game. I've seen him make elevated changes from each location that he's at. And now his second year in this new system for him with the Seahawks, he looks outstanding. Like I trust him long-term. I've now seen Brock. We all now know it's evident he's limited.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really good breakdown. I think there's nothing that I can do to dispute it because we've seen kind of the limitations that Brock has. So it's just going to be going forward. Can they get back to that spot where they get early leads? They rely heavily on that run game and they just play that smash mouth style of football that they love to play. If they can do that, they're going to win as many games as possible. And if you get teams that go out and punch them in the mouth, kind of like you said, and play super aggressively, who knows? I still think that, they're going to have a tough time, especially with this new Chase Young acquisition and those two elite pass rushers on either ends of the defensive line. But who knows? What's remained to be seen. Let's move over to the AFC.
So with the AFC division winners, this is our AFC division
It's
winners.
exactly
it matches up exactly the same because we all understand the Ravens are the best team in the North, the Jags are the best team in the South, the Dolphins are the best team in the East, and the Chiefs are the best team in the West. It's not that complicated, folks. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's very evident. Is there a particular reason you chose your four? Like, what are your four keys for each of those teams?
Well, 3 out of those 4 teams, you and I both know, have the best quarterback in the division, and it's point blank. Now, I still give the nod, obviously, to Josh Allen over Tua, but the Dolphins are one of the rarest teams that I've ever seen in NFL history. They've got a quarterback that is B- to B, and I think we can all agree Tua you wouldn't put him higher than a B+. Right? Like you would, that would be the cap that you would put him at. He's got a weak arm. He distributes the football well. He's got injury history. But the one thing that the Miami Dolphins understood was, look, if we just surround him with the best players, he's a timing thrower. Like, you love that phrase. He's a good timing thrower, understands his concepts, is a really smart kid. And when he gets the ball out quick and just lets Tyreek run, as fast as he can, no one's going to catch him. But here's the thing that I'm struggling with. Tyreek Hill leads all NFL receivers in a shit ton of categories. I believe it's yards after catch he leads in touchdowns, leads in yards total. Like he is destroying everybody else. And yet no one considers Tyreek Hill to be the number 1 receiver in the league. Everyone gives that nod to Justin Jefferson. Why is that? Well, because it's kind of like without your speed, what are you? Or, you're that's kind of all you got, is that you're just faster than everybody. So I look at the Dolphins and I kind of think your scheme and your system around you and everything working together in harmony on offense is fantastic. But what happens when you have to go up to Foxborough in December and you don't get that luxury of playing in 73-degree weather where, you're running all over the field and it's fireworks shows and you're dancing in the end zone and it's all good and you're dropping 70 on the Broncos? What happens when you go in and you play a team, a cold weather team, a Pittsburgh, a Cincinnati, a Cleveland, a New England, Buffalo? You're going to have to travel up to Buffalo at some point and play. I mean, like you are in a position where, it's great in the early parts of October and in September, but now we're entering November football. It's going to start getting really, really cold. I don't think the Dolphins have what it takes to be a Super Bowl contender this year, but with how special that offense is, I still think that they're the best team in the league, and Josh Allen has proven that the game rises and falls, and it rests on his shoulders. So if Josh Allen makes a mistake, the Bills are done. That's about all they got. So right now I think, yes, the Dolphins are going to win that division, but I also could very easily just as see that first win or that first playoff game, the Dolphins getting bounced like that. I could see both case scenarios where the Dolphins make the AFC Championship, and I could also see them getting bounced that round 1. I mean, that's just how up and down that entire system is and how up and down their team is.
And so we'll go ahead and keep it in the AFC. We'll talk wild card in the AFC. And we have one similar team on here, and that being the Bills. So this isn't actually in any particular order. This is just teams who are going to make it. So with Trace, he's got the Bills, the Browns, and the Bengals. So he's got 3 teams from the AFC North making it into the playoffs. And I spread it out. I've got a couple teams making it from a couple different divisions. So I think the Steelers are going to be a team that hangs around and ends up being pretty close to that 500, and they're going to make it in, just edging the Bengals. I think they end up having the same record as the Bengals, but because the Bengals put themselves behind the 8 ball early, I think it's going to come down to tiebreaker type decisions, and the Steelers will get that edge. And the same is going to be said for the Texans. The Texans have an easy schedule the rest of the way in. They play 7 of their games against teams who have a losing record currently. So I think the Texans realistically aren't that much better than any of those teams who have the same record as themselves. But I think the Texans have an ability with this young team. I think that they're going to get a little bit of confidence and build off that. And I think out of anything, I think that they can go 500 the rest of the way or slightly above 500 and get themselves to that 8-9, 9-8 spot, which is the only place that you realistically have to get one of these. And the Bills they're in, I think the Bills the same thing. Like, they're a good team. I don't think they're as good as the Dolphins are. Like, I think Josh Allen just you never really know. I think you can force him to have some turnovers. And I think that between McDermott and his coaching kind of interesting decisions, I just think that the Bills are a kind of wild card team. Like, they're good, but you never really know.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Bills. I think the Bills, it wouldn't surprise me at all if round one they got completely destroyed and didn't make it anywhere past that. It doesn't seem to be that they've got it all connected as they have in years past. The one pick that I'm really struggling with on my end is, the more I look at it, is that Browns pick. Have you ever seen a situation in your entire life where you can get so much right and yet still be so bad? Right? Like, on paper, the Browns look fantastic, right? Like, think about it. They start the year with Nick Chubb.
And wait, hold up right there. That's where I'm going to need you to stop. It's because football is not played on paper.
It is
football is played on the field.
Just hear me out.
And that's why the Browns have that entirety, and it's their culture. The Browns have always had great draft picks. It's hard to miss on guys who are number one picks. Look at Myles Garrett. He's not a miss. He's not a miss. Fantastic. They have dogs. They have players. It's the culture, and the Browns are a we're good on paper culture, and you don't roll over because we're just good. You have to show up and actually play.
And speaking of showing up and actually playing, I have never, ever seen every Cleveland fan will say the same thing. Deshaun's hurt. He's got an injury. His shoulder's bad. This, to me, I mean, he got cleared medically to play a few weeks back by team doctors and just refused to play. He flat out said, well, there's still some residual pain. I don't want to play if it's going to, if we're not going to have the best chance. And yeah, that sounds wonderful. And it sounds magnanimous to your team. And like, I'm thinking of the team, but are you thinking of the team? Because any true baller, and you play football, Quinn, any true baller that goes out knows that if they trust in their ability and they think that they're worth all that money, they're going to go out and say, the best chance my team has to win is when I'm on the fucking field. And I'm going to throw this ball 40 times and I'm going to shove it down your throat. So the fact that Deshaun Watson to me is saying, well, I want to do what's best for the team. It's like, do you really want to play? Like, we've seen this now, and then he comes back and clearly gets that shoulder re-aggravated. And I'm not denying that it's not hurt. But one thing I'll give Baker Mayfield a ton of credit for. Baker was actually playing injured. That dude's shoulder was completely jacked up, man. His non-throwing shoulder was miserable. And he went out every single week and through thick and thin was slinging that football. And, to his, chagrin, they ended up running him out of town. He had some words that he exchanged with the coaching staff and the medical stuff and blah, blah, blah. We know the whole Baker story. But at least Baker's out there giving it 100% every single week. Deshaun is a far better talent than Baker Mayfield. And yet the Browns are exactly where they're supposed to be, which is I want to believe in them so bad. And I want to believe that Deshaun's going to turn it around and start with this new attitude. And the Browns are going to rattle off 2 or 3 in a row. And they're going to end up being a 9 or 10 win team. But the more and more I look at that pick, I'm like, God, I don't like it at all. I'd rather have the Steelers in right now, to be completely honest. That defense is good.
I mean, that's initially the way looking at it too. I was looking at it being like, well, I think the Browns should be good. I think Deshaun should be good. He played 6 games last year. He went into this offseason. He had a complete full offseason. He's finally back to healthy. He's got nothing else going on. The Browns weren't being talked about. He could have flown under the radar, just shown up and played good football and been outstanding. But instead, it was, I'm good. And I think to some degree, I think the stuff that he went through with the Texans, I think we really had to kind of take a second and like pull back for a second. He did some stuff for the Texans that normal people won't do. The fact that he took a bus to a game so he could play, that I think is where he put so much of his effort all in on the Texans. Just the way that thing ended up going, the whole massage stuff, that whole situation, everything that happened with it and with the entire Texans situation, because there was trouble in-house before then. I think that's where it was all lost. And then I purely think that this was a, hey dude, this is him talking to his agent. Hey dude, I just want to get paid. I want a bunch of guaranteed money. My body really hurts. I went through a lot of stuff, and I just want to make sure I'm good. And I think that's exactly what is going on. He gets guaranteed money, and pretty much it's like, yeah, I could care less. Like, quarterback play with messed up hips, they play bad shoulders, they play with bad ankles, they play with bad fingers. Like what Justin Herbert looks like. Like Justin Herbert is out there rocking the giant, cap
his middle finger
on his,
is,
and then like he's got the tape and this, and then so then you get asked, and it's like, well, what's taking a snap like? And it's like, well, it's not comfortable, and it's like, of course, it's not comfortable. Like my shoulders are still messed up, like separated shoulders. Like you just kind of keep playing. Like you tell your team, it's like my shoulder's out. Just hit it. Like that happens. And I've done that. It's the same, like your elbow pain or wrist pain. And it's different on defense because you can kind of play through a lot of that stuff. Like as a quarterback, you can't, but you can. Like going, hey, you're medically cleared. It's a pain thing. It's like in the locker room.
Be out there, man.
It's like, dude, I'm in pain. Like he's in pain. He's in pain. He's got a bad back. He's doing this for his knee. He's doing this for his ankles. His neck's jacked up. Like that has 3 ribs. So it's like, come on, man. Like, yeah, come on.
You got to get out there and you got to play. You got to give everything you got, because here's the thing. The Browns have egg on their face right now, as they do a lot, right? It's the Browns, but now they really have egg on their face because you're like, hey, look at this amazing thing we paid for, and he's like, thanks. I'm gonna take my time with this and do whatever I want with that. I mean, it's almost like he's laughing at them, saying, "Hey, look, you paid for me. You were the one that gave me the guaranteed money. You didn't have to do that." But
I'd love for you guys to pay the $64 million in cap hit the next 3 years.
See, like that would just
like, go ahead.
Hell.
Like, go ahead, please.
Well, let's move over to our final NFC wild card teams here. We didn't take a look at them real quick and just briefly touch on them. There is the NFC. Oh, we did touch on the NFC wild card teams. That's right. I had the San Francisco 49ers in there. We talked about that. Or no, you have the San Francisco 49ers in there. I have the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah,
got it. All right. So
I've got Niners. You've got Seahawks. Both have
for the
Cowboys,
same reasons we touched on. Yeah, for the same reasons we touched on.
We both feel the Cowboys are slightly not as good as the Eagles, and the Falcons are slightly not as good as the Saints as we come down to the end of the season.
Well, the only thing that we're looking at, the only thing I have to touch on with the Atlanta Falcons is Desmond Ridder officially benched for the Atlanta Falcons. Taylor Heineke will get the start going forward. A lot of people are speculating if the Bears are going to be in the trade talks after the offseason of sending Justin Fields to the Atlanta Falcons. We have some speculation there. Justin, being a Georgia kid, would have loved to have played for his hometown Falcons. Plays in a dome, which is a lot more conducive to his style of play. So it just makes a lot of sense. But obviously, that's all speculation. We won't know until the aftermath of this season. That's basically all we've got time for today on Say It Like You See It. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram. Our channel is always growing. We've got memes posted up every day. We've got videos. We've got pictures, predictions, and picks all just for you. So you can go follow us right now at Say It Like You See It Pod on the IG. You can also follow us on TikTok if you would like as well at the exact same handle. For the heart of Packers country and Say It Like You See It, I am Trace, the Moose Moustakis, signing off from Wisconsin. Quinn, Mighty Q Redmond, as always, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you guys next week.